So first, to introduce myself, I'm Grant. I'm a JavaScript engineer at Third and Grove. Third and Grove is traditionally a Drupal agency. Has anybody heard of Drupal or used Drupal? Okay, I can tell by your sad faces. Yes, you have. You have seen this. You've used it. For those of you who don't know, Drupal is like PHP monolith of old, not something you really want to be using. And so I was brought on to modernize a lot of the front-end tech that we use. And so that involved Gatsby. You may be asking, what is a Gatsby? Which is like a totally valid question. It's been kind of batted around here and there tonight. Like, what exactly is it? What does it do? Let's clear that up right now. It's very simple. Gatsby is build tooling. So if you've heard of Webpack, if you've heard of Babel, if you use like NPM scripts to do any of your development, Gatsby wraps all of that for you so that there's no configuration that you need to do at all. It is also what I call a meta framework around React. So it implements Reach Router for all of its routing under the hood. We'll get to the details of why that's super cool later. And it also will ingest data from any source. And I mean any source. Oh, I like seeing the people. Okay, I see how it is. That's fine. We'll just go with that. So it will ingest data from pretty much any source. And if you can't find a Gatsby plugin to pull a source in, you can write one pretty easily. It's great. And what Gatsby does is it ingests all of this data and it puts it into a GraphQL schema. And they do all kinds of neat stuff under the hood to create this one singular stitched schema from all of these different inputs, so you can query whatever you want using all of the great technology that we just saw. So its build process, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing, uses React static rendering APIs to static render HTML. But it also bundles React. So you're not creating a static site, you're creating a React app that has the benefit of a static HTML file pushed down the line, so you get that immediate, very fast load, but then it hydrates on the client with React. It's super slick, very neat, and is definitely a contender if you're looking for speed. So hopefully that clears up any questions on like what this thing does. It does a lot. And is it fast? Yes, so not to gloat, these are scores that I actually achieved while building Third and Grove's website. This is real. Now, depending on traffic and depending on kind of loads and whatnot, this may vary, but you guys can go ahead and test it and like DDoS our website all you want. You'll see the scores. They are quite impressive. So you might ask, like, the primary point of my talk is to talk about performance in Gatsby. If Gatsby's already fast, like, why would I even talk about this? It's because I've been doing a lot of research into Gatsby sites. So Gatsby has like this showcase on their website that has like, these are all the websites that use Gatsby. And so like I picked 75 of them and I went through the process of speed testing every single one of them and documenting everything that's going on all of these. Now, there's like an upper echelon of these sites that achieve glorious scores. But then there's the rest of them. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is when you implement a Gatsby site, there are certain things you should and should not do. So Gatsby really is fast. It's adorable, isn't it? God, that's so cute. Okay, and their slogan is blazing fast, and rightfully so. They've done a lot of work to make the performant code the easy code to write. They try to get out of your way. So using static rendering, image processing, link prefetching, all of that's within reach. And trying to do that on your own in a React project, which I don't know if anybody's ever tried to do that. I've tried to do that. It is a giant pain in the ass. And so these guys have made it really easy, which is great. So Gatsby is fast, but then you happened. So there's a ton of concerns when you start working on any kind of website. And to make like a successful website or web app, some of these concerns are obviously within your control as a developer, and some of them are not so much in your control. whatever the case, performance takes a hit with each new feature or page or whatever being added. And some teams are really great about handling that, and others are maybe not so great at handling that. But after this talk, I hope you get an idea on what considerations to take when building or like adding features to a Gatsby site. So let's start out with some easy wins. Like I said before, I went through a number of Gatsby sites. A lot of the free performance that you might get from something like Gatsby Image. So those of you who have used Gatsby, have you used Gatsby Image? I got a nod, and then everyone else who thinks I can't see them on their phones in the dark. Okay. So Gatsby Image is one that I see people sometimes not using. I see like these giant bloated images that could easily just be like put through. Have you guys ever seen Squoosh App? Okay, Squoosh App is brilliant. Check it out when you get a chance. It's from the folks at Google, well, smart folks. The other thing that I see being implemented without consistency is the link component, which is absolutely wild. Like anybody who's written React knows if you're using internal links, you want to use the router that you're provided, whether that's React Router or Reach Router or whatever hybrid monster we get later this year between the two of them. Like it does rad stuff that if you're not using it, you're massively losing performance. And I'm going to show you exactly what that means. Now, all of this might seem obvious, but as my friend here states, you know, this is kind of on par with, I don't know if you guys remember early on in the days of React when you started reading about how to get the most performance out of React. Like the first thing was always use the production build, which seemed like, okay, yeah, this makes sense, use the production build. But people were writing this because there was a swath of development builds being pushed out to production. So it's not exactly obvious. It's not obvious to everyone, and so it definitely bears emphasis and repeating. So that's what I'm doing here. So this is Gatsby Image. Gatsby Image is incredible and rad. It allows you to create all of these effects. So this blur up effect allows you to kind of load a blurry image while your other image is downloading in the background. You can do background colors. You can do a traced SVG effect. It will reformat your images to WebP, which if you're unaware of that format, again, squoosh. Look at the power of WebP. Super cool stuff. So why would someone not use something that does so much for you? So one of those is GraphQL is hard. And as much as Gatsby tries to make it easy in a lot of ways, they give you fragments. So we saw some fragments being defined earlier, and they just kind of magically accumulate a bunch of data points together that we need in order to build something. Gatsby Image requires a lot of data to be queried, so they give you these fragments, but it's not always clear exactly how to do that. So some people are rightfully concerned about the added learning curve of GraphQL on top of Gatsby. There are also some known styling issues in the Gatsby component, and a lot of that has to do with, I mean, they're doing a lot. Like, they're defining widths and heights, they're assuming space that is going to be rendered so you don't get like render jank where like all of a sudden an image loads and it pushes a bunch of text out of the way, like this nasty stuff that I see on websites, and it makes me a little bit ill. So if you look deep into the documentation at this point, they've created some really good solutions to this problem, but it's not immediately obvious when you start working with this how to get around that. It can be very, very difficult. Another one is build times. So you might be surprised to know, like, it doesn't just magically create all of these blurred images or the SVG trace. Like, it takes processing time and power, and if you're doing your build in the cloud, this is a concern when it comes to money. So these are very real problems when it comes to, like, hey, you know what, I would use Gatsby Image, but my build would take, 60 minutes without any cache or whatever. That's totally fair. Now, a lot of this can be mitigated with SaaS products like Cloudinary, which Jason Lingsdorf has started kind of building a Gatsby image component that leverages Cloudinary, which is super, super cool. But Gatsby themselves has also created cloud build service that parallelizes a lot of the image processing, so you don't really have to worry about build times for long. That is all coming in the near future. But for right now, if you're working with Gatsby and you've got, I don't know, like 6,000, 8,000 images, you may want to like kick back on where you use that and just kind of decide where it's most important to have that kind of slick loading. Next topic, link. Just use it. It's very simple. If you can use an anchor tag, you can use the link component. The benefits are enormous. Let's look at what the benefits are. So this is the Third and Grove website. If you just click around, you can see, like, what's your impression as you watch, like, imaginary me from last week clicking around our website? This is quick, right? I don't see enough nodding. Okay, it's really, really fast, okay? Like, this is quick. As compared to, I went and ruined our website, where, that's the same page. Now it's loaded the page. That's the same page we were just on. Now it's loaded the page. So it completely breaks the experience. We've built this whole UI with the expectation of speed, just in the animations that we use in all of this, where if we're not leveraging the technology correctly, it looks broken, and it honestly is broken. There's a lot of issues that also come up with duplicate loading when you're completely reloading a URL in a browser, with the way that these packages are split and the way that Webpack references libraries within each of these route-based code splits. It's problematic, to say the least. So all that to say, just use the link component, please. The way that this works is just prefetching. It's something that ReachRouter has implemented, so it's not specific to Gatsby. So if you use ReachRouter in a React project, you can get the same thing by using the link component. But because ReachRouter is what Gatsby uses under the hood, you can have that benefit. Now, onto something that's maybe a little bit less obvious. Lazy loading. Has anybody ever done lazy loading on the front end before? I see some shaking heads. I got a hand up. Cool. All right. So lazy loading essentially is if the user doesn't see it, we don't load it. Excuse me. I saw a really extreme example of this earlier today. It was pretty hilarious. A buddy of mine is working on a server-rendered React site. He has like code split and lazy loaded each form within an accordion in a checkout process. It's absurd. It's so crazy. But it's, I guess, not as hilarious as I thought it was. I thought it was really funny. But how do we do this, right? Like, how do we, that's adorable, right? Okay. So, but this is confusing. So like, I don't want to load this thing, but I don't control the bundling within Gatsby, which is a lot of how you want to do lazy loading in certain things. So my solution is Intersection Observer. Has anybody used Intersection Observer? Have you ever heard of Intersection Observer? Do you just think it's somebody that's standing on the corner observing the intersection? Okay, this is a totally, it's not that. It's a totally sane thing to assume. Now, an Intersection Observer is a relatively recent addition to, it's pretty much in every evergreen browser, so like all the browsers you want to support, just not IE. It allows you to know whether a DOM element is in the viewport or not. It gives you this observable object that says, it's in, it's out, it's in, it's out. It also will say what percentage of it is in the view. So it's really, really useful in a lot of cases. And so this is what we did to our website. This is part of how I optimize our performance. So those of you familiar with React will see that we're creating a ref, we are passing that ref to a hook, and we're using the Boolean that comes back from this hook to conditionally render either this full width section, which is just filler, it's just the height so we don't get that scroll bar jank, or everything else that we wanted to defer loading, right? Make sense? Everyone's nodding, great. Now what does the hook look like? This is essentially our hook. So I call it use has been visible because I really like verbose naming conventions. And basically, it allows you to see whether an object has been visible or not. So what we have going on here is we've instantiated outside, you see this VO here. We've done some work outside of this to set up the intersection observer object, but basically we're doing this use effect to start watching this object. We pass it the node ref that we get from the ref we created in the component, and as soon as it sends us the is intersecting symbol as true, we just set our state from false to true. And so we have a series of hooks that do very similar things. We look at how much is in the DOM. We look at sometimes, so this will flip a Boolean and will not flip it back. So it doesn't unload things that go out of view, but sometimes we want that behavior, so we have another hook that does that. And we have another hook that will look at like the percentage of what's in view, which I'm finding less and less useful. I may go and refactor and just use this. So that's essentially how we lazy load it. This is the effect. So when people come to our website, I have to wait for the GIF to reload. So they come to the website, you see some things load, you scroll to a certain point, and all of these kick off. And that's because we've dumped a bunch of stuff into the DOM at this point that is now loading. It wasn't there before, it's there now. If a user comes to your page and doesn't scroll very low, like you don't want to load all this stuff into their browser. So we effectively reduce the load both in terms of bytes over the wire and in terms of DOM elements. Other perf to consider, fonts. Fonts are super heavy and designers really like fonts. Our designer, how many designers do we have here that would put 18 fonts into a website? I'm hearing a resounding no. Yeah, oh, okay, not enough, not enough. Okay, so I was handed 18 fonts for our website. But you guys saw earlier, our scores on Lighthouse are very good. So there are ways to do this. There are ways to appease the design gods and the performance gods at the same time. It took some like magical like CSS and preloading and all of this stuff to get it to actually work. So fonts are really important, and as long as you have reasonable designers that give you a reasonable amount of fonts, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. Bundle size is another issue, and when you're working in an ecosystem like Gatsby, where you have plugins to do everything, this is like NPM on crack, because you've got people coming into this ecosystem that are like, hey, like I've got, you know, a template to do this and all these source plugins and blah, 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 and it starts to bloat their bundle worse than a lot of other React projects. So bundle size is something to watch. If you want to know what your bundle size looks like in Gatsby, there is a Gatsby plugin for that, believe it or not, because it's just Webpack under the hook, or under the hood. So it's like Webpack Bundle Analyzer, which you guys are probably familiar with, but it's Gatsby plugin, Webpack Bundle Analyzer. Smart naming convention. Third-party code is another one that I see absolutely destroy websites. If you need to track your users, like, to the level that I see people trying to, if you need a Facebook pixel and a Google this and like, if you need that much information and you have like the means to process it, you need to hire an engineering team to like slim down those JavaScript bundles, because they really, really take a toll, especially those chatbots that nobody uses and nobody believes it's a real human. It's definitely a robot. Okay. That's it. That's all I got.